Understanding more about placer geology is going to help you find more gold. So let's dig right in, because that's what we're going to talk about today. Placer geology, the geology of bits of gold dust and nuggets spread throughout gravels. And, how does it get there? How does it form? And the chief thing we're going to focus on in talking about this today is erosion, which is basically just the washing away of hillsides and other things and wearing away over time just by the forces of rain and water and wind all working together to break down rocks. You see, rocks, you normally don't think of a piece of rock weathering, right? The rock just doesn't, hold it in your hand and oops, it falls apart the next minute. No, weathering of rocks can take a long, long time, a lot longer than the life of a human, right? We think of rock, I've got rocks in my yard and, they're not going to just fall apart next week. A good solid rock is solid, but over time, rocks weather and they start to break down, and there's certain minerals in rocks. It's like feldspars and micas. They break down over a long period of time to clays. Let's take a look at some rocks that are weathering and talk more about how over time rocks weather and break down.
Now, normally we think of rock being super hard and, mountains that stand for time and, rock doesn't weather away. But the truth is, over really long periods of time, it does. Now, these rocks, this is Yosemite, have been scoured out by glaciers, so there's no surface rock that's been weathered and sitting there for many thousands of years. It's all been cleaned off by glaciers, and so you just have the solid, unweathered root rock that's underneath the surface, and that's what you see in something like this. This is a hard rock known as greenstone or green schist, and it's a good, hard, solid rock. You can see these are examples from all over the world. The ones on the left are from Africa and Australia. The ones on the right are from California and Arizona, but still, they're all associated with gold deposits. But this is a greenstone placer gold area in West Africa, and you can see the surface has weathered to an iron-rich, orangey brown colored soil, and it's that same rock, but it's weathered. And the same thing is what I saw in Australia. The rock was often deeply weathered on the surface, and you had these iron-rich areas that developed out of that greenstone rock. But this is the same rock, it's just weathered. Here's another common rock associated with gold deposits. This is a mica schist, and the silvery colored rock on the lower right, that's what it looks like when it's unweathered, when it's in its original condition. In the middle left, that's kind of starting turning brown on the top and or maybe purplish on the bottom, that's been weathered significantly, but it's still kind of holding together. So that's a kind of a medium level of weathering. And then the one on the upper right is the next step of weathering. And, this is a pretty soft material. It's honestly at least 50% clay, and the next step is that it's pretty much all clay, and that's what this kind of rock weathers into. It weathers into a clay-rich soil. Here's a quartz vein. This is in Nevada, and the host rock around the quartz vein has weathered so much it's literally just soil. I mean, you could dig this with a shovel. And even on the left-hand side, you see a gray kind of rock. That's a different rock, and it's weathered too, not quite as much as the host rock for the quartz vein, but still it's weathered and soft. But this material is so soft, you imagine if water came and washed this material down the hill, whatever gold was in that quartz vein would be released and tumble down the hill and eventually into a drainage to form placers. So we see that weathering and erosion and the washing away of rocks and the wearing down of hills is essential to forming the placer deposits we see in streams and ravines and gullies.
Now, the weathering of rocks is super important to us when we're interested in placer geology, because Gold deposits are formed mostly deep in the earth, usually a half mile down, sometimes a lot further down. And the weathering of rock takes place at the surface. Okay, at the surface, rock weathers and breaks down, but deep down it's still solid. You haven't had that interaction with rain and air and water and other things. So deep down the rock is really solid, and it's down there where the rock is solid that faults open up and gold and quartz and sulfides and other minerals get deposited. Various geologies, but almost all gold deposits are related to hot liquids that are above boiling, but because they're under pressure, they don't boil. It's still a liquid, and with sulfur and hot and under pressure, the water can literally dissolve the traces of gold that are in the rock out, and then the water moves along and redeposits it someplace else. But that someplace else may be half a mile, 2 miles below the surface. So how's it going to get up to the surface so that it can weather and break down and fall apart and be released? So, so that on the surface you have this weathering. How's it going to happen? Well, the weathering happens and the gold breaks down, and you have distribution as goes down the side of a hill or down a mountain. And basically a lot of erosion happens during floods. Floods are a big thing, but heavy rains, it doesn't have to be a super flood, but a lot of big floods do move gold. Let's take a look at that.
Now, light to moderate rains, they just kind of soak in. Even ice, snow melt runoff, leads to high water like this. But this kind of water really doesn't move around gold. You look at the water, it's not quite clear, but, there's just not a lot of material in here. And so there's not a lot being washed off the hillsides, not a lot moving around on the bottom of the river. Though the water's high, this water would certainly be dangerous, but it's not the kind of flood that moves gold. Instead, it's waters like these you can see it's full of mud that's been washed off the side of the hill, and the water's flying down and moving boulders and shuffling gravel all over the place. It's this kind of huge storm event that washes material off the hillsides, scours the gravel beds, and forms new pay streaks of gold. This series of big flood photos are all from the January 1st, 1997 flood. This is the North Fork of the Yuba River. There was a lot of road damage done, roads that were washed out, but it moved all kinds of boulders and gravel around. And the prospectors that were active in this area were finding all kinds of gold, new gold, laid down in places that had been, worked before and were now filled with new gold. In the following spring when the water levels went down.
And when the water and erosion break down the rocks that have the gold in them, it gets distributed into the local drainages. Let's take a closer look at that.
Here's a diagram that just kind of shows how the weathering and the washing of a vein eventually dumps its gold into the local streams. This would be kind of like that picture I showed you a few minutes ago with the quartz vein in the very weathered, soft rock that, like I say, is so soft you could dig it with a shovel. This material, it washes away when big storms come. And this thing shows where, on the left-hand side, you have a rich chute, and meaning an area of the vein that's real rich in gold. And then the vein, as it goes more further to the right, still has gold, but maybe not as much. And they weather and dump into the local streams. And it shows how the rich chute, the rich section of the vein, will contribute to this tributary and make for some real rich gold on the bedrock.
Now, in understanding the geology of placer formation and how erosion and weathering is such an important factor, knowing is basically what leads to success. The more you know about the geology, about the origin, about how to find gold, the secrets of being successful as a prospector, the more gold you're going to find. It's the guys who know what they're doing that are way more successful than the guys who have no clue as to what they're doing. And so in order to get that skill for you, in order for you to learn this and more, I've written a book that incorporates my more than 40 years experience prospecting for gold and my degree in mine engineering, and rolled that all into one book called Fistful of Gold, because that's what I want you to find, is a fistful of gold. And I'm going to tell you a little bit more about my book right now.
So my book, Fistful of Gold, it's an encyclopedia of gold prospecting. It has information on metal detecting, sluicing, panning, dry washing, the whole 9 yards. It's all covered in Fistful of Gold. And it's available on Amazon and also from High Plains Prospectors. I've kind of partnered with them. They're a full line prospecting equipment dealer, and you can look up High Plains Prospectors on the internet and you can get a discount in buying my book and other stuff by using the discount code Chris Ralph, all caps and no space in between Chris and Ralph. And the book will really help you be successful with your gold prospecting.